Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Path to Play. Today, we will be covering some topics on college soccer and what level is right. I am here with the fellow co host, Valentina,
Hi, everyone.
and today we'll be starting with our Memory of the Week segment, just like we did last week. For today, Valentina, can you start us off with a funny high school college recruitment memory?
Yes, I can think of one that is now funny, but was certainly not funny at the time. So I was at Surf Cup, which is the big Thanksgiving tournament that happens every year. I have honestly no idea if it's still happening right now, but I would assume so.
I bet so.
Yeah, it probably is. But that's where we spent all our Thanksgivings in San Diego, myself and my family. And we were going to play a game where one of the coaches that I was talking to was going to that game specifically to watch me play. And we're probably very early on in the game. I don't know exact minutes, but I start getting the worst calf cramps ever. Just the worst. I can't even walk. And I'm playing either outside back, which is outside defender, or winger. And so I'm running up and down the field the entire game, right? Like that's just what I have to do.
That just couldn't have gone over well.
And I simply could not proceed with the rest of the game. Like I was in so much pain, I remember. My parents were there, my sister was probably there. I could see the coach in the out of the corner of my eye sitting on the sidelines, and I just physically cannot, no matter how hard I tried and pushed, I just had to request a sub. Like I turned to my coach and I was doing the little sub
Yeah,
hand signal thing.
that's always a devastating moment.
Yeah, and I, mind you, everyone out there, I would never ask for a sub, and I simply could not go any further, and so I subbed out, and I don't think my coach was very happy because obviously he knew that I was going to get watched. And long story short, I don't remember exactly what happened after, but I had to for sure have a word with the college coach after the game in some way, shape, or form and explain myself. But like I said, it's funny now, but in that moment, I was so angry and frustrated and defeated.
I bet. I can imagine that being a really awkward one because if you had, like, pulled your hamstring or something, like, you can kind of explain that
Yeah.
one, but for cramping, it's just your only explanation is,
It
I don't
wasn't,
know,
yeah,
like, I'm
and
not in shape or something,
I
but
don't
yeah.
even know how to explain it. It's not even cramping, it's just simple. It feels like my calves are rock hard. Like, it's not even cramping in the typical way that we see players cramp, but I still have calf issues to this day, everyone. Like, I run a lot and I continue to have calf issues. I don't know what it is. I had it in college as well. So I don't know. I've tried bananas and electrolytes and all the things. So if anyone has tips out there, please share them with me.
Clarification, it wasn't calf cramp, it's just a ongoing calf issue for
Yes.
Valentine.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
so diving into this topic, what college level is right for your athlete? There's so many levels and there's so many colleges for both men's and women's. And I guess it's such a big topic. Where do you want to start and which kind of direction do you want to go with this?
So I think it's important for us to say to everyone right off the bat is that assuming that your athlete is has stuck with the sport and is at the point where they're decided on college, this is the assumption. The biggest thing to know here is that there is a level for everybody. And I think we've harped on this a ton, but there that we're specifically talking about college soccer today. So this is so important to know. There's a level for every single person. If they genuinely want to play and keep going, that's just the way that it is. So I think we'll just start with kind of the main key takeaways up front. As we've talked earlier, the important thing about college soccer is that you truly have to have honest and real conversations as a parent with your athlete about what they want out of their college experience,
Yeah,
because we've seen so many cases of people that quit and decide to not move forward with their sport once in college because the fit or the overwhelming amount of athletics and academics, it was just too much. Things like that that perhaps weren't taken into consideration when choosing what path they wanted to go down. I think that happens so much that it's not a bad thing, but could definitely be mitigated if honest, transparent conversations were had from the start.
agreed. Totally agree. And I think in high school, that's something you need to go out of your way to do because I think you get into just this rhythm of going to class and playing soccer and being good at it. And you kind of get a tunnel vision of like, obviously, I'm going to play in college. And you don't
Right.
really think of like, oh, what do I want to prioritize in college? And how do I want my life to look after college sports?
And one, or I guess 3 areas you can think about focusing on if you don't know where to start your conversation with your athlete is asking questions around commitment, balance, and what success looks like for them
Hmm.
specifically. Because as we've said before, the goal isn't to chase the highest level of play, but to actually find the right level for your athlete and their personal goals and aspirations. I think another important thing to call out too is having peers and friendships and mentors in general that will give you an honest review of what college sports are actually like is huge.
Yeah, I think it's really one of those things that's super unique, and so you can't really get it's hard to get good advice for it from sources that haven't actually been there and done that. So, looking into playing at the college level, from your perspective, playing Division 1 college soccer, what was the time commitment like, and how did that affect things like, uh, hanging out with friends and academics?
Well, I certainly will say it was like a full-time job. And actually, I was recently reading this article from The Atlantic where I can actually link this article also in the podcast, but there was a study done and it showed that in the Pac-12 when it was still a thing, I think maybe last year, that athletes spend over 50 hours a week in sport-related activities. And this was from the director of Center for Athletes' Rights and Equity at UC Riverside. And I would very much say that that's true
Mhm.
because especially when you're in season, a typical day is, especially when you haven't started school, it's 2 trainings a day. I think twice a week, there's strength training, but scattered around there will be functional speed training things. And then obviously going to the training room, making sure that you're taking care of your injuries, small, um, like painful things that could be preventable injuries that you should just be going for and recovery and things like that, going to team meetings, going to film
Mhm.
sessions, all of that just takes over your hours of the day. And then in between that, it's not like you have all the energy in the world to go do another crazy activity. So you're probably either taking a nap, you're going to the dining hall to get some food, you're getting your recovery shakes in, things like that. So that just takes up your whole day. And then obviously when you're a freshman and starting out, there's a bunch of other responsibilities and commitments that you have to take care of. And all this to say, it's obviously a huge commitment even when school starts, where you have to balance your academics on top of all of the things that I just said when you're in season and making sure that you're meeting your minimum GPA, making sure that you're studying as you get older, making sure that you're making time for the extracurriculars and things that will set you up for after college. So all of it is very overwhelming.
Yeah, I think you touched on a very important thing there of yes, you will spend a lot of time playing, in trainings and going to lifts and specific things like that. But there's also a lot of time outside of specific team trainings where you will be consumed by the sport. So whether because it's just so competitive that you're kind of always thinking about it. And so you're always trying to do the extra step. So there's things like doing an extra workout or going out and training on your own if you have some free time. So it's not even just the team stuff that takes up so much time. It's also you trying to be the best athlete you can be.
For
And
sure.
so that just is just even more time.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention the travel piece,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
traveling aspect when you're traveling, if you are traveling and playing for games, um, like, preparing for game days just takes up, honestly, the entire day. Just small things like that where you just have to know from the start that that's a conversation that you're probably gonna have to have with your athlete, like, how much time do you wanna dedicate to your sport? Are you going to be okay with the fact that you'll probably have to give up things that if you are thinking about that level, you probably have already given up. But in
Hmm.
college, I think it's easy to see that others might have a lot more freedom than you do and can do other things. And I mean, college is the first time a lot of people are independent. So you as an athlete, at first you might be immersed in that bubble of this is great. I'm still in my routine of sports and everything. But sometimes when things aren't going your way, or you're finding that it's challenging to balance the two because it can get hard to start to think about a lot of other competing priorities outside of your sport when it's not high school anymore. Like college is more rigorous usually. Um, I think you have to consider the trade offs that you might have to make during that time. So, do you remember your classes, some of the classes that you took? Like, was that a challenging transition when you had to be a part of perhaps a more rigorous class that actually counted towards your major and you were in the middle of the season or things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think in high school, you get a little taste of it where you're doing homework and stuff like that after school, but then you're also driving a decent distance to go to your trainings, probably like
Mhm.
at least 3 times a week. So
Yeah.
that definitely kind of prepared me a little bit for it. But I would say junior year, once I started traveling kind of all the time, and then also getting into my major and actually taking
Mhm.
much harder classes, I was like, "Wow, okay,
Yeah.
this is like what I got warned about."
Right, and
Yeah.
no one's really looking after you at that point.
Yeah, that too, because 'cause you're kind of assumed to have, like, gotten it down.
Yeah.
But I would from what we both just said, you're super busy, you're slammed. We might have made that all seem kind of bad, but what are, from your opinion, some good things that came out of that?
Well, I think I've said this before, I think it was very much a unique experience in the sense that you're having to become a more adaptable and resilient individual early on. I think this is a topic we'll get into later, but if you're trying to get more involved in your school and trying to balance the 2, like, I think for my experience, I personally felt like I could successfully balance academics and athletics. Like, I felt like I picked a good school that would allow me
Mhm.
to stay involved in the academic side and allowed me to prioritize that equally as much as I prioritized athletics, perhaps sometimes even more so. And I know that there are a lot of schools out there that probably prioritize athletics more, don't allow you as much wiggle room. Like you, for example, I remember when you were trying to study abroad, like that was a for sure a moment of deliberation where you weren't sure if it would affect your athletic standing, things like that, where I think that's one of the things you have to factor in when you're talking to a coach or a school is what kind of program is it,
Yeah.
even within one same division.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I actually hadn't thought about that for this scenario, but I did study abroad for a quarter in Spain, which was
Mhm.
awesome. If you ever have the chance, highly recommend. But that kind of came about randomly, and I think one of the reasons that it was able to happen was because of the school that we went to being smaller, being
Mhm.
more of a tight-knit community. I had been there for about 3.5 years. They trusted me, and
Mhm.
so it was just kind of I felt like I was able to ask them, which in more intense and maybe not as good of like a relationship based program,
Mhm.
I think that would have been a much tougher scenario where I might not even have tried that. Which I didn't think about that when I was committing there,
Mhm.
but I think that's definitely a positive and something that I would tell people to consider.
Yeah, and to add on to that for one last thing here, I think I've talked about this before too in my intro episode, where I from the start, I think I was okay with going to a smaller school because I knew that that would give me the flexibility to prioritize things outside of my sport. Because I think from the start, I had a little bit of I I guess I had imagined that there were going to be other things I would be interested in doing, and the fact that I figured that my academic career would take me further beyond my athletic career. Like, I had no intention of
Mhm.
playing professional soccer ever. So I think things like that are good questions to ask your athlete as they're thinking about, like I said, even within one same division, like, take a look at the conferences, like, does it seem like a conference that allows for schools that are a little bit smaller? Does it seem like the school itself prioritize like, has certain values of academic priorities and maybe even outside of academic priorities. Like I certainly didn't pick Seattle U because it was Jesuit, but in the Jesuit values, it definitely gave a little bit more space for creativity and
Mhm.
things that weren't the conventional core classes that you take at a public school. So things like that that I think are important to think through and picturing different scenarios of a program that you might pick.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Within all the divisions, there's a ton of variety. And
Mhm.
so I think I really wanted to go Division 1 because I really enjoyed playing,
Mhm.
but then within that, it breaks down so much more
Yeah,
than I would have ever even imagined. I
agreed.
kind of I guess I had 3 schools that I kind of got it down to. Those are my last 3, but that wasn't necessarily because of what we're talking about now. This is kind of just because of how it went. But now looking back at it, it's like those are 3 such different schools. My experience would have been so different, and
Yeah,
I'm really glad I went to one that's a little smaller, allowed you to kind of grow in your own way, and I don't think I would have got that at the other 2 options. So that's definitely a really good point.
yeah, I agree with that completely, and as far as Division 2, Division 3 NAIA schools, which are usually junior colleges, I think the way that you can do your research for those divisions, and we'll go into deep dives for all the different levels because we have just acknowledged that there's a lot of nuance
Mhm.
within each division itself. As you're doing your research, I think the biggest or the most helpful way to go about an overwhelming amount of information and all these coaches that might be reaching out or that you might be reaching out to or your athlete themselves might be reaching out to, like I mentioned earlier, just picture different scenarios. In a Division 2 school, you might find a program that is way less athletic commitment time and prioritizes the academic time a little bit more. And if your athlete is someone who is trying to excel in that space or wants to go to nursing school, things like that that you know are going to consume a lot of their time, if you find a good coaching program or sorry, soccer program with a good coaching staff that will support those goals, like that's huge. And I think I had a few friends that went that route of like, I know that I want to major in this or medicine or nursing and whatever specific goal they might have in mind, picking their school strategically or narrowing down their options strategically so that they knew that they would be able to pursue that and still play their sport.
Yeah, I actually have a personal experience with that. So my brother really knew that he wanted to do engineering, and he was also a very good player. And when it was in the recruitment time for him, he was talking to both D1 and D2 schools,
Mhm.
and a couple of the D1 schools he was talking to, they were asking him like, "Oh, like what would you want to study?" Kind of trying to get a
Mhm.
feeler, and he said engineering, and they were like, "Huh, that's like a lot of schoolwork, sort of.
Yeah.
That could be hard to juggle." And luckily for him, he found a school that specialized in engineering, and he was in a scenario where it was Division 2, but everyone there was into engineering and they knew that's what they were going to do after college. But then they were also like loved to play soccer, and so
Yeah.
he it was kind of like the perfect fit between the two things that he wanted.
Exactly. And I think that's the like we have said many times before, acknowledge your goals and what direction you want to go to, and that'll help you start to prioritize things and get a little bit more clarity on what program might be the best fit for you, because it isn't about going division 1, because picture the scenario where you're at a division 1 school or your athletes in the division 1 school and they're just riding the bench, and that is just not at all what your athlete had in mind. They were hoping to play, like their passion was to play. And on the contrary, on the other hand, you might have the option to go to a Division 3 school where you're probably gonna get a lot of playing time and still get to do school and still get to prioritize the sport that you love and still be able to do both. Like, that's the important thing here, is that you can find the right fit anywhere, and the level itself as a title is shouldn't matter, and it's easy to get caught up in that, but it really is not. At the end of the day, like, you're not gonna walk away from your career and say, "Oh, thank goodness I played Division 1. I'm
Right.
so happy that I went because I rode the bench," but I still get to say I was Division 1.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think one thing that I saw a lot, and I'm happy that my mom and dad asked me this when I was in high school, is imagine if you get hurt and you have to
Mhm.
sit out for a long period of time, which happened to both of us. What is your college experience looking like at that point? Because you can't play soccer. And I know a bunch of people who got hurt and just like, it's just such a fast-paced environment that they got hurt and they weren't really able to recover and weren't able to kind of get the love back and decided to transfer or stop
Mhm.
playing just because the school that they were at, they wouldn't have gone to unless soccer was involved.
Yes, yeah, and that's a tough one to think about too, because you always think that it's not gonna happen to
Right.
you, and then of course it happens. And then last thing, to your earlier point as well, on your brother's conversation with various college coaches, I think when you're able to actually understand what your goals are and pursue strategically the programs and coaches that you want to talk to, it's easier to have the conversations with the coaches, because
Mhm.
a lot of the time, exactly how you just described, the coaches will be very upfront with you
Yeah.
on what the school's like, what the program's like, the expectations and things like that. Like, I don't think they're going to allow someone who has very different goals to be on the team, unless you're obviously some sort of superstar, like the next,
Right.
like, Messi prodigy or something. But most of the time, they will be very straightforward as far as, you wanna study med school at this Pac-12 school, or I don't know, or a
Yeah.
very competitive SEC school, which is another very big conference for soccer, things like that, that I think they would probably at least question you for a second.
Yeah, they don't have much time. And so they like want you to obviously have a reason for wanting to go there.
Mhm.
So if you're just kind of like, "Oh, I just want to go to any school possible
For
that's
fun.
D1." Yeah, it's like that's probably not as easy of a conversation to
Yeah,
have. Like,
right. It's a business at the end of the day.
yeah.
It's business decision. Um, I guess to bring all of this together, we've said a lot of things here, and just asking and reflecting on things like, am I okay with going to a smaller program? and being able to pursue my academics. Or maybe you even figure out that your athlete is fine with going to a high division school and with the potential chance that they might not play, but they're fine with that because there are a lot of other things that you can get out of it. You can meet
Mhm.
people, you can build a network, you can, if you really like the school, I mean, yeah, if I could go to Stanford and not play, I would probably still go. Like things like that, that if you're clear on what you're okay with trading off or what your athlete's okay with giving up, with sacrificing some things for other things. In a Division 3 school, you might not get that same academics or athletic scholarship. I think it varies by school, but the important thing is like, are you okay with trading off one thing for one program and then perhaps getting it for the other? Depends on your priorities, but the idea is to consider and reflect on the different scenarios that you might be in with the variety of programs that are out there.
Yeah, I think there's so many programs out there that you shouldn't kinda limit yourself to any. I think you should think of what would be ideal and then start to look for programs that kinda fit your mold.
Yeah, and also important thing here is nothing is beneath your athlete. Like, I think sometimes you might feel like you're too good for a program or a
Mhm.
school, but encourage your athlete to not turn down those opportunities, even if it seems like not that big of a deal or not like they're the small school in Montana or something like that. I'm just making this up. Like there's no it's nothing's ever beneath you. It's always good to keep your options open, especially when people are reaching out and wanting to just have the conversation. There's definitely a lot to learn even from just having conversations with coaches.
Yeah, I think for sure. And if you talk to a college coach and they could even like refer you on to someone else or they know a coach and let's just say you want to go to California. That's like you really want to go there. Maybe they know someone who lives there and coaches there. So I think they're all so connected and just even getting the experience of talking to a college coach is huge because when else would you be able to do that?
Yes, and in our opinion, we think that it's just far better to play at a level that fits who your athlete is, what they want out of the experience, as we've said before, and thinking clearly about where they want to sit in the program, what role they'd be able to play, what role they're willing to play, things like that. That it's important to have the upfront conversations, even if they're a little bit complicated and difficult to have in the beginning. And we just know so many athletes that end up making a bad decision or a decision that they regret because they went with something that felt overhyped in the moment. They went with um, guidance that was probably not as honest guidance, whether that be from their coach, from peers, etc.
Yeah. I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but one thing that is super helpful in this whole process of finding out what you want that next step to look like is talking to someone who you trust, someone who
Hmm.
has been there and done something like that. And that at this point, it doesn't need to be actually talking to someone you know. It can also be listening podcasts or watching videos because there's so many resources out
Yeah.
there now of people who've gone and played and
Yeah.
want to give their opinion.
Someone that can give you honest, raw
Yeah.
experience review of how it's going so far. And it can be anyone. I mean, I was still in high school and some of my friends had graduated already and they were off playing in college, and I remember obviously we would still talk a lot. I'm going to shout them out here, Kendall and Adriana, if you're listening. They gave me very honest reviews and would always tell me what was going on with their college life, both in and out of soccer, both very different academic paths as well, different divisions. And I think that was huge for me to, even before I committed, I guess at that point I was committed, but just gauge on what to expect for college and what I was getting myself into. And maybe I didn't listen at the time, but I think I'm glad I did now.
All right, that is all we have time for today. I know we touched on a lot of different topics. I promise that we will dive into those later on. As you may have noticed, some of these earlier episodes are going to be more focused on giving you guys a general summary of kind of what's happening, but we will dive deeper into the topics that we touched on today.
Yeah, there's no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to youth sports. And there's a lot that we want to do and we have plans for. So stick with us. Hopefully, these conversations are insightful and they resonate with some of you. If you have feedback on anything that we've covered, any thoughts that you might have to make this show better, anything that might be helpful for you, please feel free to contact us or submit onto our feedback form. We always look forward to incorporating your guys' thoughts to make this show better.
Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.